Okay, just I heard many of you saying that it was not clear what to do with this then. So the idea was just to let you have an experience of what a research could be, what to research on a interaction, on a therapeutic interaction could be. And maybe since it was written in the slide, but the slide was not visible, the idea is that the observer is part of the phenomenological field of the therapeutic exchange. And so it would be nice to correlate what the observer feels with what the client and therapist feel. So the next step would be, and maybe you did it already when you discussed it, is to correlate the feeling of one and the feeling of the two. And this is a basis for a phenomenological research. Now, thank you very much. I give you the word to Gianni again.
Okay, thank you, Margherita. So, the next speaker is Ken Evans, past president of the EAGT, and besides many other things, I want to mention that he's the author of the chapter on research in the book on Gestalt therapy in clinical practice. I guess the colleague who commented your chapter was Leslie Greenberg, I guess. Yes. So, with pleasure, I give you the word, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you. I was sat at the back and I saw that Margherita was sat directly under this painting. So I'm going to sit over here. I'm finding it very difficult to be fully present yet because this is my first professional engagement in 5 weeks. For the past 5 weeks, these have been my clients. I co-run a small farm down in Normandy in France and helped to bring 61 lambs into the world, of which 55 are still alive after 2 or 3 days, so that's great. That's a good average in terms of outcome research. And these two I found in the feed tray. They lost their way with their mother. Incidentally, the little yellow tag in the ear is their identification tag. I have to put it in the ear when they're a day old. And it really is more painful for me than for them. Anyway, we found the mother, and she wasn't very well, so we got them into the sheep pen and got in the vet, who gave her antibiotics. And the next morning when we, can't see a thing now. The next morning when we checked them out, she had died. But the mother had placed herself, she'd put her 2 little lambs in the corner and placed herself in front of them to help comfort them and protect them from the cold. I had a lot of respect for that ewe. She'd been around for 7 years. And so since then, I've been bottle feeding these lambs 4 times a day with 200 mils each of milk. And yesterday morning, I left them in Normandy in the capable hands of 2 lamb sitters and left the farm. But as I was leaving the farm, I remembered that the big ram, who would be very happy here in Rome because his name is Caesar, needed moving from one field to the other. So I stopped the car by the farm gate, got out, went back into the house, put my Wellington boots on, big green Wellington boots, got a bucket of food, opened the gates, and walked in front of the ram. Now, he is 85 kilo, and he's very mean. So I noticed that he was walking faster than he usually did, so I began to trot. He then began to run even faster, so I went into a gallop, and I ran across the field and just made it, and threw the bucket on the ground, locked the gate, and started to drive to the train station. After 5 kilometers, I realized I still had my Wellington boots on. So I went home and changed my shoes. Then when I did get to the train station in Flers, it was eerily silent. There wasn't a soul in sight. And then a little French guy came around the corner and said, "On grève." On strike. But it was only the ticket office, not the train. So I got on the train, 2 hours, 15 minutes to Paris, crossed Paris, got on the RER to Charles de Gaulle, got to number 2, and looked for my flight on the notice board. It wasn't there. So I checked my ticket. Sure enough, it was the right time, the wrong airport. I should be flying from Orly South. So I got back on the RER, went all the way to Antony, got off in order to make the connection to Orly South, but I couldn't get out of Antony Station because my ticket was back to Montparnasse. So I had two choices, to climb over the barrier or humbly ask the inspector to let me through the gate. He let me through the gate, and I got to Orly South, and I got on the plane. But first, I had to get through EasyJet. We should do research on EasyJet. The lady said, "You have 2 suitcases, Mr. Evans." I said, "No, I have one and a case that holds my iPad." She said, "You must put it in your other case. You cannot take 2 through the customs." So I put it in my case. When she wasn't looking, I took it out again, put it over my shoulder, and put a jacket over the top, thinking I was very clever. As I was going through the gate, she said, "Mr. Evans, is that your iPad under your coat?" I thought of replying with in the immortal words of Mae West. "No, I'm just pleased to see you." But I thought better of it. So back in the suitcase it went. Eventually I got here. Then I found tourist information was shut at the airport. The taxi office was shut at the airport. The coach office was shut at the airport. Everything was shut at the airport. I eventually found a taxi and sat with my eyes closed for the whole journey into Rome. Not that I was tired, but I was praying. The guy was driving like a lunatic. Obviously, he had an appointment with his mother-in-law. Then I got to the hotel, Duomo Nova Bethlehem. I thought, Bethlehem, a place of retreat. There was a delightful, sweet nun waiting for me who didn't speak a word of English. So we sat there trying to converse in Romanian. Well, I knew a little Romanian, and she knew a little Romanian, but eventually the manager came, and he said, "Okay, sit down." Got on the computer. "We do not have a booking for you." So I explained it had been a long journey, and I wasn't moving from the hotel reception. I'm quite happy to sleep there. So they found me a room. So here I am. That's a lot better. Okay. Yes, well, this talk on relational-centered research, I'm hoping to inspire some vision. I don't know whether I'll succeed or not. That'll be my responsibility, not yours. I'm a gestaltist. I take responsibility. This talk was first delivered in its original form in the University of Oxford, in Magdalen College in 2011. And then I repeated some of it in a very exciting research workshop in Stockholm in 2012, hosted by SAG, the Swedish Association for Gestalt Therapy, and now here again in Rome. It forms, much of the information is from a book by Linda Finley and myself called Relational-Centered Psychotherapy, Research for Psychotherapists, Exploring Meaning and Purpose. And it's my contention that research has to be about meaning and purpose. And our premise is that a competent, relationally orientated Gestalt therapist, equipped with an appropriate introduction to qualitative research methods, can be a competent researcher. By the way, all these slides are available to you. I can, through Morka, send them out by email attachment, so you don't have to take notes. We also think that research will be enriched considerably by the professional competencies and emotional literacy expected of a relational Gestalt therapist. You have interviewing skills, a capacity for critical reflection and intuition. You think inferentially and normally have a capacity for warmth, openness, and empathy. Some of the literature I'm drawing is Leslie Greenberg, particularly his 1996 book, Facilitating Emotional Change, which I think was a landmark publication. Paul Barber's book, Becoming a Practitioner Researcher. Phil Brownhill's edited book, Handbook for Gestalt Theory, Research and Practice. And the book with Linda Finley and I, and then some articles. One in the book edited by Gianni Gekeli and Rubel, and finally, I think a publication, maybe this year, Phil will tell you about that later. I've written an article with Linda Finley on an invitation to engage in relational-centered phenomenological research, which is in a book edited by Phil and Joe Melnick. But despite my really deep commitment to research now for 20 years, I teach it at universities, I supervise doctoral students, help create research programs. I do want to say that research is contaminated by politics. And the idea that research equals reputation, equals acceptance, is naive. The question is, does research drive CBT, or does CBT drive research? In my experience, psychotherapy modalities are like tribes. And the fundamentalists in each tribe do really not want to relate to anyone else, unless they accept their own way of looking at things. So if we try and break into the evidence-based club, then what that will mean is a loss of soul in terms of our Gestalt values. It's not research that will secure our future, it's our values that will secure our future. And the vision is to have a research approach that will uphold and grow our value system. And I guess this is a conclusion, but I'll say it now. I think we need vision. In the Old Testament, it's written somewhere, without vision, my people die. And the vision would be not that we join an existing club that basically doesn't want us anyway, that we help create a new club. And it is not just Gestalt therapy. I'm really pleased there are some people here from different modalities. And I think we would be best not to try this alone, but to go and seek like-minded, valued people from different modalities in the humanistic and integrative tradition, and there are many who would also support us in the kind of human research that many of us, I think, prefer. And then we can keep that open. Keep it open for people to join, not exclude. But I think joining the existing club will probably mean our demise. I think it'd be best if we had the confidence to create a new club and develop our own research based on our own values and values of our colleagues in other professions, other modalities. Because there is a form of internalized oppression that affects the humanistic and integrative psychotherapies, including Gestalt. What do I mean by internalized oppression? I think for classical psychoanalysis and CBT and certain other monotheoretical schools, they often convey the impression that their approach represents the truth of psychotherapy. And there's a widespread tendency to elevate scientific methodology, such as RCTs, into an icon of theoretical confidence. It's bullshit. When these dominant schools of psychotherapy assume a so-called scientific basis, they often become indeed are dogmatic and oppressive. And the negative attitudes, stereotypes, and prejudicial perspectives don't merely reside in the minds of these dominant groups, but have become deeply ingrained in society at large. Every week, every single week, I hear on the radio from some part of the UK the idea that the statement, research demonstrates, blah, blah, blah. Research proves, blah, blah, blah. Research suggests, blah, blah, blah. What the general public hear is research has proved this to be true, whether it's a new drug, whether it's a political opinion, and so on and so forth. And it's bullshit. There is no form of research that can tell you the truth, because truth is ultimately relative. And yet people believe it. And it's important we don't get carried away. And both the dominant groups in our society, those who secure the insurance payments, those who secure government and university acceptance, adopt something that sociologists call social closure. Social closure is where you talk down about another modality or about a particular group of professionals. You ridicule them, or you assume or imply that they're dangerous. And people in power believe it because they get frightened. The problem is that the people, that the groups who are talked about in such a way can end up believing it. And then what happens, you see it when they strive to become like those who oppress them. It does us no favors in Gestalt therapy to try and be as acceptable to society as, say, CBT. It does us no good to strive to be clearly evidence-based, because what does evidence-based prove anyway? So let's be careful that we don't actually, to be mindful that we may be suffering from a form of internalized oppression if we believe our future is with research. Research is very important. I commit a lot of my life to it, but it's not the salvation of Gestalt therapy. Our values are the salvation of Gestalt therapy. You can mix methodologies in research, but it's very, very dangerous to mix paradigms. And I want to make a distinction between paradigms and methodologies. Paradigms is what Kuhn talked about in 1962 in the structure of scientific revolutions. A paradigm is a way of looking at the world that's global, that encompasses an entire age. And in the history of Western philosophy, there have been 4 paradigms through time. The classical age in Greece, the modern age on which modern psychology still rests, the postmodern age, which really is the foundation of Gestalt therapy, and a new paradigm of relationship. In the classical age, God is, therefore I am. God is absolute, everybody else is relative. Everything is contingent upon God. And then the modern age, the great age of enlightenment, in Descartes' famous statement, I think, therefore I am. And everything moved. It was a paradigm shift of huge proportions when our perception changed from a theocentric universe to a ratiocentric universe. And now the belief in objectivity, in scientific discovery and inquiry came into its own and has proved of enormous benefit to humankind and has produced an incredible technology. This is true. But we also know that it's one thing to have the technology, it's another thing to have the morality to handle it. And when 50,000 men died on the Somme in one day in World War I, and countless millions of Japanese died from the dropping of the atomic bomb in World War II, the whole idea of science as the salvation of humankind was seriously questioned. And so we came to the postmodern age. I am, therefore I am. Now, instead of absolute truth, became relativity. Instead of objectivity, came subjectivity. The idea that one can stand outside a situation objectively is nonsense. The researcher always influences the researched to some extent. If there is no influence, there's no real research. The problem with relativity and subjectivity, with phenomenology and existentialism and field theory, which are all essentially postmodern epistemologies, is that if you take them to their extreme, they're absurd. If everything is relative, on what do you decide anything? What is the basis for any action? And so we move into a potential new paradigm, that's all we can say, of relationships. You are, therefore I am. And these photographs were taken in Israel some years ago when a group of Gestalt therapists went to hold a dialogue between Palestinian and Arabs and Jewish psychotherapists. Oops, I don't want that one. That's out of date. Okay. So the research I'm suggesting, not the sole research I'm suggesting, but as a broad brushstroke, is more relational-centered, which fits with our work as psychotherapists. Relational-centered research is co-created. We tend to see the research, not as a subject, but more as a co-researcher or a co-participant. And the embodied intersubjective relationship, that is the core of the therapeutic relationship, is also the core of the research relationship, where you reflect on other and on self, and self in relation to other. And there is a potential for new learning and growth. The theoretical foundations of relational-centered research are existential phenomenological philosophy. We're talking Merleau-Ponty, Buber, Levinas, Scandling. And within the psychotherapy field, Gestalt theory, particularly Heisner and Jacobs, intersubjectivity theory of Storolo and Atwood, and relational psychoanalysis, which is moving more and more into a contact-orientated psychotherapy. And collaborative and feminist methodology, which speaks eloquently of the need for equalization and horizontality in the relational encounter, the research encounter. As far as a specific method is concerned, there's no pre-structured method. In the research we did in Stockholm, it was a mix of phenomenology, feminism, and dialogue. You can mix methodologies. We didn't mix paradigms. It was qualitative, not qualitative and quantitative. So there's no preset method. That doesn't mean anything goes. The data collection, well, the researchers need primarily to be open, to be empathic, to be present, and reflexive about what is happening in the relational encounter. And the analysis focuses on the relational dynamics as well as learning about the other person. So the key processes of relational-centered research would be the same kind of characteristics that you require to be a competent Gestalt psychotherapist. Empathy and openness, researcher presence and inclusion, embodied intersubjectivity, reflexivity, and trust in the process. Being with, the essence of work with another person in this form of research, as in psychotherapy, is to be present as a living being. And to the extent that I understand the other, I no longer know who is speaking sometimes, me or the other. So let's look at this epistemology just in one slightly other way, because it's not just about research, it's about how we view the social world. There's the positive approach, which aims for truth, which seeks knowledge in the real world. The researcher seeks objectivity and to stand outside the research. And he looks for research, or she looks for research that can be verified and replicated. There's the interpreter's position, which explores multiple meanings. Truth is relative. Many realities, as truth is socially, culturally, and historically and linguistically constructed. The researcher is inside the research. Subjectivity is celebrated, not shunned. And the findings can only be partial and unfolding. Now you tell me, where does Gestalt lie? In the positive or in the interpretivist? Linked to the positive interpretivist debate is the realists, who believe the world is made up of structures and objects which are in cause and effect with each other. The aim is to study and measure the real world out there. For example, illness is real, and we need to examine the effects on people. And the relativists, who say there's no simple cause and effect. A diversity of interpretation is emphasized. All illness may be real, but people experience and understand it in different ways that will vary and cannot be predicted. Now you tell me, where does Gestalt lie, in the realistic or the relativistic branch? Between the two polarities is a critical realist who accepts there's a real world out there, but that it is socially constructed. Meanings are fluid. Stories of illness reflect subjective perceptions and meanings which are valid for the individual or the group. So, relational-centered research embraces an interpretistic epistemology, but varies where to place ourselves on the relativist realism continuum. Psychotherapists generally favor a critical realist position as we seek to capture the way a phenomena is experienced. And that's important, to sit down with people and help them and us to explore, what does this mean for them? What is the purpose of this experience in their life? All qualitative research acknowledges the researcher is implicit in the research and influences the process and the findings. And this is particularly emphasized in RCR. You will often hear a born-again quantitative researcher tell you, but you are subjective, you are influencing the research. We say, yes. So there's qualitative and there's quantitative. Qualitative, study the world of subjective meanings. Inductive and exploratory with open questions. The aim is to understand the social world, to focus on how and what. And we see that research takes place in natural settings to capture people's actual life experiences. Quantitative focuses on quantifiable objective measures to test validity or truth of a theory. They test hypotheses. The aim is to predict, explain, and control behavior, to focus on why. And it takes place in control conditions. So you tell me, where does Gestalt tend to lie, in the qualitative or the quantitative? Now, I am not saying that you cannot mix qualitative and quantitative paradigms, but I'm saying you must take great care when you do so, that you are doing it in a conscious and in an awareness way. Otherwise, if you do it unthinkingly, then what happens, you end up undermining the values of what it is you're purporting to do. So I'm not saying you cannot do qualitative and quantitative research together, but they have to be very carefully thought through. A critique of the qualitative is that it's too subjective and impressionistic. That's true. That it's not scientific. That's true. That the richness of data can compromise confidentiality. Well, not if you're rigorous about it. That it's not generally suited to evidence-based practice. That's absolutely true. That it's time-consuming and expensive. Yes, it is. Gone a bit too fast there. Where am I? I've lost my way. And the quantitative? Quantitative is too detached from everyday life. It takes insufficient account of research variables. There's too much emphasis on cause and effect. It's not generally suited to exploring process issues, and it assumes the existence of external facts. What we call for, I think, in relational-centered orientated research is transparency. We emphasize transparency and rigor in the dialogue through being present and empathic. And there's less emphasis on the actual protocols and methods. In fact, sometimes the exhaustive and overly complex analysis can be a substitute for a lack of ability to relate, or an incapacity, or an unwillingness to relate. I was very interested in what Gianni said about the more scientific the research, the less precise it is. So it's time to stand back and actually maybe not follow such tight protocols and actually have more room for the researcher to be present and the research to be present. If some of you are new to research and you're setting up a research project for the first time, it's like going on a journey. It's like coming to Rome. First, you've got to decide where you're going. I'm going to Rome. That's choosing a research topic or a question. Then, Find out more about the destination. Look in a travel book or on the internet. Review the literature. Next, plan the practicalities of the journey. Don't go by EasyJet. And that's the methods of data collection and analysis. For certain destinations, visa applications may have to be made. I think you have to make a visa application if you're going to Russia still, I believe. This is ethical approval, essential for certain fields of research. And then the traveler may organize tour guides or local people to help. That's getting a supervisor and getting support. What I would say is, if you're going to choose a research topic, tap into some passion. Without passion, my people die. Tap into something you're really passionate about, because the time you get halfway through writing a dissertation, you're going to be so bored with it. You've read it 1,000,000 times already, and you're sure that no one else is going to see any value in it whatsoever. So keep something that's going to keep your passion up. Keep fairly grounded and modest in your aims. Most doctorates fail because they're too ambitious. They want to measure the moon. Be specific and precise. Let your research question evolve and take time to reflect on the nature of it before you set off. Well, that's just about literature reviews, and I won't go into that. Methodologies. Before you choose a method, think of the aims. Sometimes people have an idea of how they want to do something, and then think of what it is they want to do. So think about what it is you want to do, and think what would best fit that particular research aim. So if you're exploring life experience, whether it's depression, divorce, loss, abortion, whatever life experience you may encounter, if it's a life experience, the method would orientate probably towards a phenomenological, relational, dialogical, psychodynamic, autobiographical, feminist, or narrative research. And the data collection is likely to favor interviews, dialogue, or descriptive protocols, which you would then analyze narratively and or thematically. Skip through that. And if you're engaged in research, set up some support systems. If you're going to do it on your own, that's one thing. You might want to actually do a group research activity. Check your backup systems like IT, library, access, peer support. And if you're exploring an emotional area, such as abortion or divorce or depression, then think about taking it to therapy. Because you can experience vicarious trauma that you pick up in interviewing people who have suffered a trauma. And for those of you who want to go into relationally orientated research, I would say, as well as an academic supervisor, if you want a master's or a doctorate degree, get a psychotherapy supervisor too, because a lot of the work in the interviewing will involve parallel process issues, transferential issues. And these can be explored, they shouldn't be ignored, and they often lead to a deeper understanding of the unfolding material. So just finish very briefly with an example of some collaborative research. You can find this, it's a free download. It's issue 6 of the European Journal for Qualitative Research in Psychotherapy. If you go to that website, www.eurosips.eu, which is my website, go to the research journal. There are several issues there, each with about 4 or 5 research articles, and you can download them all for free. www.eurosips.eu. And this was a trip to Stockholm in 2012 with about 36 Gestalt therapists from the different Scandinavian countries, organized by SAG and its energetic chair, Jojo, who's sitting in the front here. The method was phenomenological. The group were invited to explore an issue, theme, or experience relevant to clinical practice, using a relational-centered, and in this case, dialogical feminist approach. They split into groups of four groups of, I think, 12 or 8 people, and each group came up with a different potential research topic. One was maintaining hope in a hopeless case. Second, the experience of an identity crisis as a Gestalt therapist, sharing personal issues with a client, and the client disappearing. That's not vanishing, but not attending for therapy. And anyway, we then had a large group discussion and came to a common mind and decided to explore an identity crisis as a Gestalt therapist. It was almost unanimous that people wanted to do this. So first, people were asked to write down individually on their own experience of a personal crisis of identity. And I asked them if they would think about it in terms of what they experienced in their body, in their feelings, in their thoughts, their behavior, how it may have impacted them spiritually. So it was the whole personality. Gilles Deleuze says that personality is the way we organize our most significant experiences, thoughts, feelings, body, etc. So we did it that way. They recalled an example in order to do so. And then they shared a description and an example, and their own example in small focus groups of 8 people. So there was a lot of small group discussion of each person's experience. And then I asked them to go back into their own individual writings and identify the trigger for the crisis. So, for example, one person continued to work while they were suffering a profound grief. Another was wrongly accused of an ethical problem. Somebody else was concerned about being projected upon. I thought that was rather amusing because that happens quite a lot as a therapist, projection upon. But anyway, all these and many others were triggers that led to an identity crisis. Then the people were invited to identify some key words or themes that encapsulated this experience for them. You know, what was the real essence of the experience for them? And then the small group of 8 people were asked to write a composite paragraph together describing the experience of identity loss, trying to arrive at a common mind. And I thought this was going to take all day, but actually it was quite amazing how quickly people came to recognize the common experiences. Then all 4 descriptions are written up on flip charts for the whole group to see. And at this point, we had a break in the process, and I asked people to reflect on the process itself. Was what we were doing relevant to their practice? Did it resonate? Did it feel authentic? And the one critique was that we might have created gender-specific groups to see how identity crisis may be experienced differently from men and to women. Then they looked at how they managed the situation. And then there was a suggestion that we have some more creative ways of illustrating this experience beyond the written word and discussion. So I invited the groups to go back into their small groups and to think of a metaphor or some poetry or some painting or some dramatic reenactment to try and encapsulate their written experiences. Now, this was on the 3rd day of 3 days of exploration. They misheard me completely. Every group only heard dramatic reenactment, whether that was because it was Scandinavia, and of course they are brilliant filmmakers and actors in Scandinavia. I don't know, but that was really something. Each group rehearsed a presentation of what it's like to be in an identity crisis, and I could have kicked myself for not having a camera. If you're going to do this kind of experiential work in large groups, take a camera. They were fantastic. I really, talk about Oscar nominated. They were really amazing. And yeah. So just to see what we did, the method was phenomenological. We explored the issue. We collected the data through individual reflections, right up in small groups. We did initial analysis through key themes, focus groups, and this created media at the end. So a very creative 3 days, and it was finally written up and published in the journal. We also discussed the material. Just finished with this. How would I conceptualize the experience of identity crisis from a Gestalt perspective? We looked at that. What are the implications for my clinical practice? We looked at that. What were the strengths and limitations of the research? What might I have done differently as a researcher? What new research directions might have emerged for me? And what next, which was publication. Now, I want to finish where I started. This is Claire. And Claire has 4 babies. 4 babies. And everyone is still alive, which is a miracle. Thank you very much.
We have still 5 minutes. Maybe there are some questions before the coffee break. So if there are any questions, are, I think, welcome.
Questions or comments?
Or comments, of course. Okay.
I just have a practical question.
Yeah.
Possible to get these speeches before my presentation on mail, because sometimes it's going quite quickly.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
All the slides and also all the presentation will be available on the website of the AGT. All will be recorded. Yeah. And I have one comment, Ken, is about the fact that I appreciated the way you reminded us the importance to be free from the demand that are already in a rigid shape in the field. And I think that in order to be free and not to disappear as the patient in the space, we have to be rooted. And we have to be rooted in our epistemology and in what is present in the field. So we have to be skilled in order to be free. And I think this is very important. It is the aim of such seminar like this one. Want to say something more?
Yes. I'm not offering because I'm very busy, but if you haven't yet introduced research into your training institutes and would like to, it's a sign of maturity to maybe approach people in the field to come and do a research workshop, hands-on, experiential, so that your students learn the theory by actually doing it. And I think this is, I've done this now on 8 separate occasions, and it's a really good way of imparting the skills of research by actually doing it and then reflecting on the experience. And the important thing to remember, I think, is the similarity between doing Gestalt therapy and doing good research. We took a group of 16 trainees on a residential, which was a 5-day research residential workshop, and they were exploring what it was like to be on a residential. Of course, because they were on a residential, they were regressed. Some of the time they were away from home. For some of them, it reminded them of their early boarding school experiences, so they were really quite young a lot of the time. And what they realized was how difficult it is to think on your feet and reflect theoretically when you're regressed. And that happens to us as therapists. When a client, particularly a borderline client, is projecting on you like hell, you're not fully in your adult most of the time. You're struggling to survive. So there is a very clear link between the reflexive practice required of a Gestalt therapist to understand the process and the reflexive process in the research encounter. They're exactly the same. So they actually feed each other. And the research helps to give you a frame to think reflexively, and it actually helps mature the work, our work as a psychotherapist, and our work as a psychotherapist helps to deepen our work as researchers. So, thank you.
So, thank you very much, Ken. Let's have a break.